Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing some Disney themed book reviews. First up, Conceal, Don't Feel by Jean Calanita and The Odd Sisters by Serena Valentino. Conceal, Don't Feel by Jean Calanita is book 7 in the Disney Twisted Tales series. Princess Elsa will one day become Queen of Arendelle. After the unexpected death of her parents, the weight of that responsibility is suddenly thrown upon her, along with hidden ice powers that she didn't know she possessed. Elsa lives a life that grows lonelier day by day, and she feels as though there is someone missing who should be by her side. A girl with red hair often appears in her visions, but she has no idea who she is, but feels as though she ought to. On the day of her coronation, Elsa accidentally unleashes an eternal winter upon her land, and she runs away in the hopes of protecting her kingdom, but also with the hopes of finding the mysterious girl in her visions. So, beginning with Conceal, Don't Feel by Jean Calanita. This is obviously a retelling of sorts for Disney's Frozen. I love Frozen, you guys. So yeah, all of these books in the Twisted Tales series, they ask a big what-if sort of question that will change, the plot in some significant manner. So this one is asking, what if Anna and Elsa never knew each other? I did really like this book, you guys. I really quite enjoyed this book, and I do think the big change, what if Anna and Elsa never knew each other? I do think for the first 25% of this novel, I would say, that does really affect the story in big ways, I think. I'll kind of get into that a little bit more, I guess. Because what is different to some degree, the girls are separated because, in the original cartoon, even though they are kind of living rather estranged lives, they are still aware of each other in that original film. They know the other exists, So yeah, at the start of this novel, we do get like some big flashback sequences explaining how it is that they do have a permanent separation from each other and whatnot, because something with the magic spell that the troll does, it's altered in a significant way, that they are forced to forget each other, and I'll kind of leave it at that. I don't want to get too heavily into all the magical mechanics of it. So yeah, Anna and Elsa are not aware of each other pretty much the entirety of this book, you guys. Anna is still living a nice life of luxury and privilege off in Arendelle. She's the princess. Her parents do still die like they do in the movie. She does still become Queen of Arendelle. Her powers do reveal themselves, in public at her coronation. But then Anna, in the meantime, Anna has been adopted by a couple up in the mountains. They're bakers. Anna's a baker now. So yeah, that's kind of the big difference there that you're getting at the start of this novel, that Elsa's still kind of living the same life that she is, but yeah, she has no knowledge of Anna, obviously. But then Anna is living off up in the mountains. And yeah, she even meets Kristoff and Sven in a very different manner. So yeah, I think for the first 25% of this novel, the big what-if question of this book definitely is quite pivotal, and the start of the book is very, very different to some degree than what happens in the original cartoon. But the thing is, once you do get past that original the first 25% of this book, I do think what may be frustrating to some readers is that the plot, for the most part, stays the same, weirdly enough, as the cartoon. Now, this didn't particularly bother me too well, because I think just the fact that Anna and Elsa are not aware of each other was just enough for me to feel like things were kind of different just enough, if that makes sense. So it didn't really particularly bother me too much, but I do know other reviewers on Goodreads, they just felt like this novel was still just a rehash of the movie with just the slight difference, But yeah, the plot for the most part of this book is pretty identical. There are some things that happen in slight different ways, slight variations. Like for instance, in the cartoon, there's the whole relationship between Hans and Anna. But instead of there being any sort of Hans and Anna relationship in this book, there's actually a relationship between Hans and Elsa, which is interesting. And in the original cartoon as well, we know at the very end of the movie what Hans's big end game is, his big plan. We find out at the end of that movie he is actually the villain, whereas in this book, we actually know Hans is the villain fairly early on. There's we get a chapter with him, and he kind of is monologuing his whole, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to try and marry Elsa, and then I want to try and get rid of her so I can become king of Arendelle. We get his whole Machiavellian scheming right from the get-go. So it's not a big surprise that he's the villain. And then, like I said, Anna meets Kristoff in a very different way. That relationship is slightly a little different. So it's little things like that things are kind of rearranged in slight ways. Some things may kind of appear more further into the beginning of the book rather than further into the back, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, other than that, this book is pretty much the same thing as what happens in the cartoon, because, yeah, Elsa does still release an eternal winter across Arendelle. She still flees up into the mountains. She becomes her new hot, glorious self, singing Let It Go and whatnot. Seriously, the chapter where Elsa takes off into the mountains, there are lines taken from the Let It Go song that are kind of inserted into kind of how she's processing and thinking. It was kind of bizarre. Yeah, she still takes off up into the mountains. She still becomes her brand new glorious self. And then Anna, in the meantime, she feels like it's her duty and her mission to save Arendelle. Because she finds out that Queen Elsa is responsible for this winter. And yeah, the entire book, Anna and Elsa do keep having these random visions about each other. They keep seeing each other. They don't know why, they're not sure why they're having these visions, why they have a connection to one another. So that's still kind of, that thread, that sister bond, that sister relationship is still very heavily present in this book, despite the fact that the two of them are separated the entire book. So the book is still playing with those ideas and themes of that relationship and that bond, rather than a romance story, because the original cartoon was not a love story in a traditional sense, it was a love story between family. So that is still very present and heavy in this book. Elsa's journey is pretty much the exact same what you see in the cartoon, because she still is very withdrawn into herself. She very much internalizes things. She has to gain that confidence and courage, and a lot of her journey in that original cartoon is kind of this whole idea of self-love. She has to learn to love herself, really. So yeah, that's a big part of this book still. Anna is still very vibrant, spontaneous, spunky, just constantly just talking, yapping away, Kristoff is still, kind of his rather sarcastic, grumpy self, still having a crush on Anna. Sven is still Sven, he's still a reindeer. Olaf is still in this book, you guys. I was kind of wondering if Olaf would be just totally cut from this book, but Olaf is still in here. Olaf actually appears in the book way earlier. He actually pops up relatively soon after the death of Anna and Elsa's parents, because Elsa kind of creates him in a moment of, just terror and pain and panic, and yeah, when she's kind of having these weird visions of Anna, who she doesn't realize is her sister at the time, So Olaf actually comes into being much earlier into the story, and whatnot, rather than popping into the story with Anna and Kristoff. He's actually there with Elsa the entire time. And yeah, Hans is definitely still Hans, he is the villain with all his plotting and scheming. But yeah, as I mentioned, his relationship is primarily with Elsa, not Anna. which I really liked. And I also really enjoyed the original characters that were presented in this story, because there is Anna's adoptive mom and dad. I really liked them. It kind of made me think, man, I wish they were in the original cartoon, because I really loved them. And then, yeah, part of like Elsa's inner court is a guy named Lord Peterson. I really liked him as well, you know, kind of this older gentleman that, you know, she needs to confide in and get, you know, advice and wisdom from, because he worked for her parents, you know, in the past before their death. So yeah, in general, another fantastic installment to the Twisted Tales series. I do think this book, even though I did still really enjoy it, I didn't really particularly have too much of an issue with it. I do think this book, because all the other books in the Twisted Tales series do make pretty big, gigantic leaps, you know, and things that really do kind of shift the narrative. And like I said, the narrative in this, really, Anna and Elsa are just separated. They have no knowledge of each other, but it really doesn't do anything else to the plot, unfortunately. So I can definitely see why that might frustrate and turn off readers in regards to this book, because it does. At the end of the day, it does read identically to the cartoon in some ways. But yeah, I still enjoyed it. The two of them being separated, having no knowledge of each other, that, like I said, that was just enough for me to be satisfied and still enjoy the book, and still kind of held my interest to see where it was going to go. How were they going to remember each other? You know, how were they going to remember the fact that they are sisters? What events would kind of get them to that point? So yeah, I enjoyed this installment of the Twisted Tales series, and I definitely cannot wait to get to the next one. The Odd Sisters by Serena Valentino is book 6 in the Disney Villain series. In this installment, the Odd Sisters are finalizing their endgame that may destroy the Fairylands. You guys, I give up on the Villains series. I really do. I'm not going to spend too much time sitting here reviewing this book, because I'm just so frustrated, and I hate these books so much. They just suck. I hate to say that. These books suck, you guys. And I know Serena Valentino is probably trying her best. I don't know how much blame to put on Serena Valentino, because this is a Disney book, and Disney probably had, the Disney publishing team probably had their hands all up in this series and wanted this series to be a certain way, sound a certain way. And yeah, Serena Valentino, unfortunately, is just kind of part of the machine, part of the cogs that are turning. And I am just kind of curious how much creative liberties and license she had, to kind of really craft this type of story she wanted to tell, and how much Disney had their hands in these stories. But yeah, this Disney villain series, they just suck, you guys, and that's so upsetting, because I think they just had so much potential and promise. So yeah, this book in the Villains series, all of the previous books in the series had pretty much focused on, a particular Disney villain. But yeah, this book, as the title is saying, this is called The Odd Sisters, and the Odd Sisters have appeared in every other book in the series, and they have in some way influenced how the Disney villain becomes the villain that they become. So the big difference in this book, we're taking a break from the Disney villains, and instead we are focusing entirely on the Odd Sisters. And I have said in the past, the Odd Sisters have been my least favorite characters that have popped up in all the books. I do not really like them. I find them just over the top and just way too much, and they take away from the story that I want to be reading, So this entire book is all about them, and filling in all of the miscellaneous gaps that Serena Valentino has had throughout all of the other previous books. And I just did not like this book. I didn't care for it. I don't care about the Odd Sisters. I don't care about all these other original characters within this universe. And the weird thing is, this is the weird thing, because a big complaint of mine in regards to all the other books in the series is the fact that the villains themselves are hardly in their own damn book. Other than the first two books, I think the first two books in the series did a great job of having the villain as the primary character. Because in the very first book, the evil queen is the star of her book, and yeah, the beast is a star of his book. But then after that, it's like, where's Ursula? Where's Maleficent, you know? And then even Mother Gothel kind of disappears from her own book, kind of at the end of that book. The villains just kind of disappear from their own book for the most part, and instead they become all about the Odd Sisters and all of these original characters that Serena Valentino has created, and all of that drama and all that baggage. And weirdly enough, this book kind of does the same with the Odd Sisters, that they're kind of absent in their own book, and it's just so weird, and I don't get it. It's like there's finally a book all about them, and they've been in all the other books like crazy to the point of irritation, but then yeah, finally in their own book, they're just a non-entity as well, and it's just so bizarre and weird and strange, and I don't get it. And I mean, there are some Disney characters in here. For the most part, Snow White is in here a lot, the Blue Fairy, the fairies from Sleeping Beauty. There are a few miscellaneous Disney characters in here, but yeah, for the most part, this is a book entirely about the original characters by Serena Valentino. And as I've said, I don't care about that group of characters. So yeah, this book, that definitely just made this book suck for me. And don't get me started on this book, the writing. This book is a hot mess. It's convoluted. It's confusing. I didn't understand what was going on half the time, and the whole time I kept thinking to myself, okay, this is a book that is targeted towards kids and teenagers. How do they even comprehend what the hell's going on in this book? Because I, as a grown woman, can barely comprehend exactly what is going on in this book, and that's a problem. So at the end of the day, I didn't like this book. It sucked quite terribly. But from my understanding, because the next book in this series is called Evil Thing, and that's going to be focusing on Cruella de Vil, and I was kind of looking through some Goodreads reviews about that book, and it sounds like that book is going back to kind of how like the very first book in this series was, because I absolutely loved the very first book in this series, which was focused on the Evil Queen. I absolutely loved and adored that book. So it sounds like the Cruella book is kind of going back to how the first book was, and it's going to kind of be a bit more of a standalone, rather than having all this other baggage kind of floating into it. So I'm hoping that the reviews are correct in that, because I am looking forward to the next book in the series, hoping that it's almost like a reboot of the series in a sense, and kind of getting back to what I want to read, because I started these Disney villains books. I just wanted a simple origin story for, you know, classic Disney villains, how they become the villains that they become. I wanted them to all be standalones. You know, I didn't want some massive world building, because at times this whole series has felt like the Marvel Cinematic Universe almost, but of Disney characters instead of Marvel superheroes, you know? And this series just falls apart because of that, and it doesn't work, in my opinion. So I'm hoping the next couple books in this series maybe are perhaps a reboot of sorts, and maybe I will actually quite like them. But yeah, this book, I just don't recommend this series in general, you guys. I definitely, if I had to pick out a Disney series for you to read, I definitely recommend checking out the Twisted Tales series. Yes, there's probably some highs and lows within the Twisted Tales series, but for the most part, I think they are very well done, you know, written, and how they're handled. And yeah, they're standalones, you know, and yeah, these books are not standalones, unfortunately. So you guys, that is it for my thoughts and feelings on these two Disney themed books. One I really liked, the other not so much. So yeah, that's going to be it for this video. In the comments below, have you guys read any of these books? Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you plan on reading them in the future? Just let me know your thoughts. So that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.